So, APIs and N8N, simple breakdown. You have definitely heard of APIs. What are APIs? In this video, I'm going to tell you what they are, how they work, and everything you need to know about them. So after this video, you'll be able to set up your own API requests in N8N and use them in agents to expand what your workflows can do. No coding experience required. Why do they matter? First, they help you reach beyond N8N. APIs let N8N communicate with external systems and services, expanding your workflow capabilities beyond N8N's built-in features. Second, they help you connect to popular services. You need to work with Gmail, HubSpot, Slack, or ClickUp. Their APIs make this possible, giving you access to their features and data. Number three, they help you unlock possibilities. Once you understand how to read API documentation and set up requests, you'll dramatically expand what your workflows can accomplish. I'm going to give you an example. In Anytone, you can build an AI agent or workflow, but on its own, it can barely do anything. You would want it to connect to Gmail or Slack or ClickUp for it to be able to do some sort of action, for it to be able to uh, do what you want it to do. This can only happen if you have an API connection. Without an API connection, you cannot connect Anytone to the outer world. And this makes Anytone useless. This is why APIs are very important. So, what is an API in plain language? It literally means application programming interface. Simply put, it's a way for two systems to talk to each other. Simple. For our purposes, it's how N8N communicates with other services like email platforms, CRMs, or search engines. The process is straightforward. You send a request for information or action through the API, and the service, which in this case can be Slack, sends back a response with the data or confirmation. So N8N sends a request to Slack, and Slack sends back through the API either that either it sends back the data or that the action you were requesting has happened. Now we go to the restaurant analogy. The restaurant analogy is one of the popular analogies to explain APIs and how they work. So let me explain that for you. Consider yourself to be a customer at an Italian place. If you want to make an order, you can only make an order based on what is available on the menu. And there won't be Lebanese food on the menu, there will only be Italian food. You can order pizza, pasta, etc. But you can only order what's available on the menu. You make an order, the waiter takes your order, gives it to the chef prepares the order based on what is available on the menu, gives the order back to the waiter, and the waiter delivers the order to the customer, right? This is how it works. So, similarly, the API works in a very similar way. The end user with a browser checks the API documentation, which is the menu for what kind of actions or requests you can make with a certain platform like Slack. You check Slack's API documentation. You look for the action you want to have Slack do. You tell the API, I want Slack to do this. The API sends your request to the server backend system of Slack. The server backend system of Slack either carries out the request you asked it to do or sends back the data you requested. Through the API, it either sends a confirmation that the action has been done or sends back the data that you requested. And this is how you receive your data through the API, or you receive the request success message through the API as well. This is how API works. Anytime, like an end user using Anytime, wants the AR workflow to send a message through Slack to a channel. So through API, the Anytime workflow sends a request, an API request, HTTP request, to the server backend system of Slack, tells it to send a message to a certain channel, and that is what happens. And the API gives back the user the success message. This is how API works. It's very easy, very simple, and it's very important. So again, looking at the menu means you examine the API documentation to see what's available. Telling the waiter, you place your order through an HTTP request. I'm going to tell you what that means in a few. Kitchen prepares food. The API endpoint, which is here, processes your request. Food is delivered. You receive the response data you requested. Very simple. Native integration versus HTTP request. Same result, different approach. The native integration simply means that N8N has built an integration with Slack, for example. You don't need to build it manually. If N8N hasn't built an integration API integration for you to connect N8N to Slack, you're going to have to build it manually through something called a manual HTTP request node. They both use the same concept of an HTTP request, but one is pre-built and one you have to build manually. So the native integration is built-in app block. You connect your account once, you pick an action, you fill a few boxes and variables, result, it works right away. Under the hood, though, it is still doing an HTTP request for you. The node just gives you a friendly form that you can use. On the other hand, the manual HTTP request, this is how you can talk to any API, even if there's no native node. Think of it like this. From the restaurant analogy, you read the menu, API docs, you tell the waiter what you want, HTTP request, the kitchen, API endpoint, sends the food back, the response. Use HTTP request if there is no native integration. If the app you want is in the list of any native integrations, use the native node first. It's faster. Key point, native integrations are just HTTP requests with a friendly user interface. Learning to make HTTP requests yourself opens up all APIs, not just those with native integrations. For you to get the point, Anytan has pre-built native integrations, like I think 500 or 1,000 native integrations like Slack, ClickUp, Google, etc. There are some websites or platforms that Anytan hasn't built native integrations for. So if we want to access that website or platform, we need to create an HTTP request for us to do so. That's the only difference. Most of the time, you're going to have a native integration to use, so do not stress about this. The five essential components of every API request: method, endpoint, query parameters, headers, body parameters. Like very simple, very straightforward. Don't get confused right now. You're literally just setting filters and making selections. For example, you have a request, the HTTP request. You're telling Slack, for example, what you're trying to get from it or what you're trying it to do, what you're having it to do. Um, there's something called curl. The reason I added this curl into the video is because it helps you build a manual HTTP request way faster. Let's say that Slack doesn't have a built-in integration with Anytan. We want to build an HTTP request for Slack. If we check the API documentation, most of the times there is a curl, client URL. It's a command line tool for transferring data with URLs. API documentation often includes curl examples that you can leverage in end-to-end. So if you check the Slack API documentation, we can find curl for us to copy paste into Slack, into the HTTP request, and the HTTP request can be configured like automatically. All of this would be configured automatically without us doing anything. Now we move to saving credentials once. So I'm not going to read what's on the screen because it might be complicated without you seeing what I'm doing. So I'm going to leave that for later on once I actually show it to you in Anytan. But you need to understand the simple concept. Every time you need to connect Anytan to an external platform, tool, CRM, whatever it is, there has to be an authorized connection. What do I mean by that? For you to connect Anytan to Slack, for example, you have to give Anytan the password to connect to Slack. Otherwise, how would Slack know that Anytan is doing an action on my behalf? Slack needs to know that I'm the person who actually authorized this Anytan AR workflow to do the action that it's requesting Slack to do. So the only way I can do that is by taking something called an API key from its name. API key is like a password. We take that API key from Slack and we put it in Anytan, in the Slack node in Anytan. I'm going to show you a live example of that. But for you to understand, once we add that API key into Anytan, only then can Anytan have an authorized connection to Slack, and only then can Anytan actually do actions or request sensitive information or data from Slack back to Anytan. Without the API key, without an authorized connection, you can do nothing. And it's a very secure way to connect Anytan to external platforms and tools. Now, reading API docs without stress, what you look for is core components, required versus optional, data types and ranges, etc. Like nothing to stress about. Common response codes, these are the codes that you get back when you have a workflow executed. You might get back success, which is the number 200. It means what you were trying to do has succeeded. 400, which is bad request, it often indicates that it's an invalid JSON or missing required parameters. 401 is unauthorized. We just spoke about authorization. 403 is forbidden, your account doesn't have access. 404 is not found. 429, too many requests. And 500 is server error, which means not your fault. The reason you need to just be aware of these codes and what they mean is once you see 400, you need to understand what kind of problem that is this. Like, is it a bad request or is it an unauthorized? Otherwise, without you knowing, you might literally spend hours trying to solve a problem for it not to be the problem that you are facing. So it's important to understand the numbers. The simplest way to learn this even more is just by building HTTP requests and by actually connecting stuff to each other. I'm going to show you all of that in N8N in like future videos, but for now, just understand that it's just a way to connect N8N to external platforms and request or send data between N8N and those platforms. So that is mainly it. This is just a quick setup checklist. Thank you for watching this video. I hope this video helped you understand the difference between HTTP requests, what API connections mean, and how all of this works together. See you in the next one.